time is 7:35. Sorry, 7:36. It just changed on me, and we are joined now by another Rich Girard. So this could get confusing for all of you. Yeah, it is my dad. I am not a junior.
No.
You know, I actually figured out how my name was made.
You did?
Yes.
How was that?
Well, your first name, which is my first name, is your mother's maiden name.
Wait, that's correct. Yes, it is.
So.
How about the middle name?
Is your father's name.
That's correct.
So if I were to do something like that, I'd have to name my kids Churus Girard.
Correct.
Churus Alfred. No, Churus Richard.
Churus Richard.
Yeah, so I couldn't.
They probably wouldn't appreciate that.
I couldn't carry the family paradigm.
No.
So, this was actually not my idea to have my dad on, but it was a good idea. And I told the story last. Did I tell the story about how it came to be? I think I did, but.
If you did, I didn't hear it. So you may want to retell it.
So anyway, I got into a Facebook exchange with my dad over the issue that we have been covering here. And obviously I did something to kind of put a bee in his bonnet, and he said to my wife who was visiting that I should have him on the show. Well, here he is.
Okay.
So
that's right. That's right.
And Dad, I'm going to let you explain to our audience sort of who you are. I'm sure anyone who's been through schools in the South End for sure knows who you are. But there are many in our audience who won't, and to have an understanding of why it is I asked you to come and discuss the issue of school violence here.
Well, as you know, I spent 35 years in the educational system of Manchester, all of which were at Southside Junior High, then middle school. I started teaching there in 1968, actually, and I worked my way all the way up through the principalship when I retired in 2001. So there was a lot of experience, both in the classroom and administratively, in dealing with all these types of situations. And every once in a while, these kinds of situations, as they pop up in the schools, kind of grind at me a little bit, because I've seen it, lived it, going through it, and I know exactly what's happening in the schools, as well as how people perceive what is happening outside of the schools. And I think it's important that everybody get a little bit of different perspective. When you're a school administrator and you go through these, you have to be really tight-lipped. You're under investigation. You're trying to get the process and listening to what everybody has done, what they're doing in the schools. And so you really can't say too much of it. I have a little bit more freedom now because I don't have to listen, and you know, I can listen to what's happened, and I can appreciate what you know, the administration at Memorial is going through, and the administration at the superintendent's office is going through. So from that perspective, I can give you a little bit behind the doors kind of scenes of what's happening in the schools and what they're trying to do to resolve this issue. And it's very, very complex. And for me, it really paints a poor picture of actually what's happening in the schools. I've gone through these situations several times, and it always, the only thing you hear is that negative little thing that's happened in the school, because there are so many positive things that happen in school that many people don't understand what's really happening. And I would encourage you go ahead and continue this. We all should be aware and sensitive to that these situations do happen, and but there's also, I encourage you to bring on people that are probably doing some very positive things with the kids in school.
Oh yeah, and you know, Tom Brennan made the point when he was here that 15,000 other kids had a pretty good day in school.
Exactly.
And we don't, the goal here has never been to sort of sensationalize the issue or to find fault with an attacker or a victim or anything like that, but to explore how these things are handled, which is why we spoke to the superintendent and the lieutenant in charge of juvenile and the school board member and all of the other people that we've had, because I think these things are legitimate questions. Manchester's had some pretty high profile violence in its schools in recent years, and I don't know that there's a great deal of confidence in the general public. You take a look at my Facebook page, the Girard At Large page, where kids at the schools saying it's a joke to report it, fights happen all the time, cyberbullying happens all the time, and nobody does anything. So I think there's a perception out there that needs to be remedied. Now, you said that you have tell us what's happening here. And by the way, in none of the interviews have I taken an administrator or anybody involved in the investigation and tried to get them to cough up what they're doing. I know I can't do that, and that's not useful, so I've had to focus on the macro. I had the young lady in. With my invitation, she didn't come looking for this. Because I figured it was a springboard, and the reason why she wanted to come in specifically was because she says bullying and stuff like this happens in school all the time. People are afraid to come forward because they get called out like she's now being called out. And it's a blame the victim kind of mentality. These kids run in packs, and anybody who gets picked on or who gets bullied or whatnot is typically afraid to come forward because they think they're going to make it worse. Why do kids in the building, why do people, generally speaking, feel that that is the case?
Well, they probably feel lack of support at the school level, and let me just go back to when I was in the schools and what we tried to do, and I think that I will try to explain, because I can't speak specifically for what Memorial tries to do when these incidents do come up. But I know that when I was at Southside, we were very, very aggressive in to try to deal with these bullying situations. And, you know, bullying started when I started in 1968, and I think it's a problem that
so it's your fault then.
Yeah, it's probably my fault. but it will be always a situation that will always occur in schools. All right, it's not a problem that's going to go away. We can create all the policies and the laws to try to deter that, but that really doesn't deter it. It's just, I think it's a nature of the beast, unfortunately. But you have to be extremely aggressive. I know when I was at Southside, we looked for these situations. If we saw these situations we reported them, we aggressively pursued them. We let no incident that was reported go. We attacked it as aggressively as we possibly can. Or could at the time.
Now, did you find yourself an anomaly? Did you find yourself an anomaly in the system in that you went after it the way you did? And before you went, go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure, because again, you know, when I was at school and when I was the administrator or principal, we had 1,100 kids. We had our hands full every day, and I can't tell you what Arthur is doing at Memorial High School. I couldn't tell you what Steve Dunn was doing at Hillside at the time, but my hope is that they took it as seriously as I took it. And I could only take care of the building that I was being the administrator of at the time. So you have to be aggressive on this issue. And kids have to feel when they come to you that you're going to do something about the situation. You can't just let it hang out there, because yes, they will get that feeling that this is happening. We have no vehicle to tell people that this is happening. And if they do tell people what is happening to the situation, are they trying to resolve the situation? You know, in this particular case, from what I've read and what I've heard, this had to be going on for a period of time. Something had to be... A child just does not walk up to somebody and violently attack them the way supposedly that this occurred. This had been going on for a period of time. Maybe that student who did this felt that there was no other way to deal with the situation. Did she in fact have a place to go and say, listen, I'm really tired of this happening, I can't stand it anymore. But kids tend not to take that avenue. For some reason, they feel that if they confront, and in this particular case, attack the other student, that this might get resolved. Well, actually, it didn't resolve anything. It has only created a worse situation for not only the person who had been the victim, if you would like, or the person who did the assault, or the battery in this particular case. It's not resolved. So they really, unfortunately, if they don't feel that they can bring it to somebody, they can't talk to an adult in the building, then they feel that they have to do it on their own. And unfortunately, this is what's happened. But we had tried to set this up at Southside. They knew that they could, and they knew also that that should be their first choice, is to come to an adult and say there is a problem.
So do you think there's the fact that so many people, very publicly, on my radio show twice, 2 anonymous callers, including one this morning, a mother who called in but wouldn't go on the air, posts on our Facebook page with people repeatedly saying that the school doesn't deal with it. Should we look at the administration of that school and question whether or not they are turning a deaf ear or a blind eye, and figure out whether or not they are aggressively and properly handling this at the building level?
Well, I can only assume that, you know, what happens as a result of these situations, people start to look at what happened prior to, you know, how can we tweak, how can we be more responsive? And they're also now looking at what can we do afterwards, all right? Now, does the Tom Brennan, the superintendent, say, okay, what's happening at Memorial? Are we being attentive enough? What are we doing to make sure that these, you can't prevent all these situations from happening. It's an impossibility. We all know that. It's going to happen, all right? But are we being as aggressive as we possibly can? I can't answer what's happening there. Only the superintendent, and I think that's the purview of the superintendent to look at what had happened, how it was handled prior to and afterward, to see if there's something else that they can do to it, so kids can feel that they can come into the school and say.
And part of this has got to be evaluating whether or not the administration at the building is really doing its job here.
Well,
I'm going to put it in those terms.
Yes, you have to. You absolutely have to. I think there has to be a self-examination on the part of the administration at Memorial High School. It also has to be an evaluation by the superintendent's office to make sure that they're doing everything possible that they can do so that these kinds of situations are minimized. You can't prevent them all. It's absolutely impossible. I can tell you stories. There's not an administrator in this entire country that likes to see an incident like this, because it turns the school into a negative focus that people look at and say, oh my goodness, what's going on at that school? When, as we have all said, there are so many positive things that happen in the schools all the time. So do they have to look at it? Absolutely. Do they have to make some changes? Possibly. Okay? You know, as far as handling the situation.
Before we get to that, Girard At Large time is 7:47. We are interviewing retired Southside Principal Rich Girard, my dad, but we're going to take 60 seconds to check traffic and weather, and then we'll be back. Girard At Large time is 7:49. I understand the Beach Boys were looking kind of old last night at the Grammys.
They were.
Right.
They were showing the mileage.
Yeah.
They still sound great though.
No, they did.
Well, I got a message through Facebook on Friday after I announced that you were going to be on the show today from a lady, I'll just call her Joanne, in Manchester, who said, absolutely true what you said this morning about Southside being one of the best schools under the Menswar Girard authority. My daughter was bullied for several years at Highland. Although it was addressed many times at HGF, the bullying continued until she graduated to Southside. The other girl was in the next lower grade who remained at HGF. The bullying began again when the other girl graduated to Southside. Under the Menswar Girard authority, I telephoned the school to report the problem, and I was told the problem would be resolved that day and assured me my daughter would never be bullied again. I had my doubts because at HGF, my daughter, that's HGF is Highland Goss Falls School.
Yes.
HGF, my daughter continued to be bullied after many complaints to the school. To the credit of the Southside, the problem stopped that day. The difference between the two authorities, in my opinion, is Highland spoke to both children and parents as equals as the problem, and Southside spoke only to the one child and one parent as the problem. Whenever the subject of bullying comes up in conversation, I always use Mr. Menswar and Mr. Girard as examples of how the person in charge can make or break a school. I'm glad to hear you're having your dad on the air.
Oh, thanks.
So I thought you want to know that, but
yeah.
You know, one of the things that has sort of lingered in my mind as sort of the unspoken issue, and I talked to the superintendent about this, and I talked to Committeewoman Ambrosi about this. What are the schools required to report to the central administration? The answer is nothing. The answer is required. Now, there's a matter of what happens supposedly in practice. But unless the principal wants to suspend for longer than 10 days, the principal, under the rules of the board and the policies of the board and the administration, is not required to report anything to the central office. I found that astonishing. And then you take it the next step, and Committeewoman Ambrosi says, well, really, unless it's an expulsion, we don't get anything from the administration. I find that really difficult to understand how the administration is supposed to know exactly what's happening in the buildings, and how the policymakers on the school board are supposed to know what's happening in the buildings if nobody's under any obligation to report certain things as they happen. Am I wrong about this? Does this need to be corrected?
Well, let me go back historically to what I used to have to do, and maybe things have changed in the code.
You've been out of it for 11 years.
Well, I've been out of it for a while, but whenever you got to, you know, we go back to the Code of Conduct, and we created that back in the late 70s, and We created it because we wanted some consistency in the way that the discipline was administered to kids, not in just one building, but in all of the buildings.
And you were president of the union at the time.
I was president of the union.
You had to battle the school board to implement
It was a political fight, and I didn't have some good friends at that time, but it had to be done. But going back historically, is that when we created the code of conduct, when the incident in Memorial it would be considered a level 4 incident, which is the highest level, which, you know, guns and assaults in this particular case. And if I recall, and I was looking for I squirreled it away and I couldn't find it this morning before I left, but when you get to a level 4 situation, and if I remember correctly, there had to be a report sent down to the central administration.
Well, level 4, yeah, I think
okay,
you're right.
So...
And it has to be reported to the police also.
Correct. And in this particular...
Let me interrupt, but
yes.
Interestingly, we found out in September that several assaults by students on teachers were not reported to the police or the central administration. As reported, you might remember Mayor Gatzis had something to say about that when he
yes.
looked at the workers' comp reports.
Yes. Well, and I can't believe that. I mean, you know, in these situations, and again, I can only tell you that we follow the letter of the law. I mean, it's a two-pronged investigation when you get a situation. The school does its research, it interviews, it gets the information, it gets everything down, because we needed to, because it was a level 4, we needed to make sure that that report that we did was sent down to the administration for further action. At the school, or the school level, you can suspend up to X number of days. I think it's 10 days. And in the situation where we thought it was grievous enough to ask for additional time for the student to be suspended, or potentially expulsion because there was guns in there and so on, we had that zero tolerance. We had to put our chickens and eggs together, so to speak, so that the administration, when it went down to them, would be able to read it and have a complete and clear understanding. But before that report was ever sent to the central administration, I was always on the phone to the superintendent's office to say, we had this very grievous situation that happened today. We had an assault, or we had this, we had that. Because many times, if it gets out and people start listening to it, people from the radio or the union leader or whoever it was at the time, was if they thought it was a newsworthy kind of item, they were on the phone. They were on the phone to me, or they were on the phone to the superintendent's office. So I didn't want the superintendent ever to be blindsided from a situation that happened in my school. So it was standard practice for me, or when I was the assistant for the principal, to call the superintendent's office. This is what's happened. You'll get a written report. You'll get what we did at this level, and we'll pass it down to you. But I want you to know right now, this is what's going on, in case I get a call or you get a call.
Have these things become so routine that only the truly sensational assaults are being reported? I mean, other than our show, there has been no mention of this that we can find anywhere in any other local media.
I would hope not. I would hope that situations like, you know, what you feel as an administrator is worthy enough for, you know, they should know that. Those are the kinds of situations, you shouldn't be afraid to hide those things. Those things need to be put out there so that everybody knows that this happened, and that you have a transparency of what you did, what the police are doing, and what the superintendent's office will eventually do.
There seems to be a mentality that I sense that says the more stuff like this gets into the public, the worse it is for the schools. But I wonder whether or not trying to keep these things quiet actually allows the problem to grow worse, because it doesn't allow for the scrutiny of the public and its involvement in the discussion.
Well, I think you can look at it two ways. You can look at it the way that you just said, but to me, you know, you look at it and say, I think this is a situation that reflects what's happening in our society. I don't want to hide, you know, kids are going to come in. You put 1,100 kids, or in the case of Memorial, you put 2,000 kids in a building, you're going to have these kinds of situations, and they bring them in. They're going to bring it in. So I was, you know, yes, it was negative, but I knew that, listen, the kids come to school, these things are going to happen. I'm not going to defend what I'm trying to do. I'm aggressive of what we try and do. We try to prevent these kinds of things, and sometimes we're successful and sometimes we're not. But we had things in place that we could always deal with it and carry through the situation. So I never looked at it in negative. I looked at it, we had this, we're doing this, and this is what has happened to Bill.
All right, after the top of the hour, we're going to talk about where this thing should go from here and what some of the, well, how things maybe should unfold. After the top of the hour, we'll return with Rich Girard, retired principal at Southside Junior High School, my dad. I'm Rich Girard, your host. We'll be back right after the news. Good morning, Manchester, and welcome to Girard at Large. Those of you in the surrounding towns are welcome too. Our time is 8:07. Our station is AM 1250 WGAM. You can find us on the web at girardatlarge.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at Girard at Large. We continue now with Rich Girard, former principal, assistant principal, and teacher at Southside Junior High School. Yes, also my dad. And you'll be able to tell by the video, thanks again to Bill Wynn from goffstowntoday.com, our videographer. This will be posted to our YouTube channel, and I'm sure you'll be able to see the family resemblance. So, no doubt
More like your mother.
No doubt you've heard the family resemblance. Now you'll be able to see it. So, Dad, this is what I will say definitively that I know from all of the people who've called and posted and video that I have in fact seen of the assault. We know that this attack was an ambush. We know it was premeditated. We know it was premeditated because we have video of people with their phones on walking down the hallway to witness the spectacle. We know that the girl has got a concussion, a nose so severely broken she needs reconstructive surgery, which she's going for tomorrow morning. We know that it happened in between classes, somewhere in the 500 wing near the cafeteria. And teachers were either asleep at the switch or it happened so fast that they weren't able to get there. We know that she found her assistant principal after she was able to kick the girl off of her for the third time in the fight. Get to her assistant principal, who brought her to the nurse, and then called her parents. We know the police interviewed the attacker. By the way, I got a phone call this morning saying I can't call her an attacker. It's absurd to call her the attacker, it's the other girl. We know that the one who did the damage was interviewed first by the police, and that the police did not really interview the victim on site, and to my knowledge, not really even afterward. And that's what we know. So you're the principal in this situation. What happens next? What are the things that we need to be aware of, and how these things are handled, should be handled, should be looked at? And and by Lindsay's admission, there was a Facebook exchange between the two girls a couple weeks prior, which she says the other girl initiated, picking on her and her boyfriend. And at any point, by the way, is there any justification for having someone's head kicked in?
Absolutely not. I mean, let's take it from the part. Let's take it from after the assault occurred and what I would have done, or what my perspective and what we try to do. And again, I don't. A lot of things happen in these situations. It's hard to be definitive, but if you have a situation like that, and I know the 500 wing, I know the cafeteria, and even at Southside there were dead spots in the school. You could put teachers outside their doors, which we tried to do between classes, because that's when things will happen the most, when you put everybody in the hallway at the same time. But and again, not to say that teachers were asleep at the switch, but to say that there are areas it's harder to get to and to supervise at the time. But it is quite clear that this was a situation that had been going on for, as you said, a couple of weeks, and it's back and forth, and today, of course, you add the social media, Facebook, and you have it going on online. It's just not in the school. It's now they're texting each other, they're doing this and they're doing that. So it was a situation that just kind of grew in intensity, and apparently the young lady who did the assaulting had it. She had had enough of what was going on, and she made a choice there, and the choice was to try to resolve the issue by punishing the other girl. And obviously, in my look at it, it's a poor choice.
Well, what about all the kids who knew this was coming and didn't say anything?
And it's no different for them.
Should the administration be looking for those kids who took videos, who took photos, who knew what was going to happen? Should there be some sanction against those kids, none of whom went to any authority in the school to say there's going to be a problem?
Well, again, it's a very disappointing fact to me as the principal or as an educator that they chose not to find an adult and say, listen, this is really going to happen. You really need to intercede because my friend is going to hurt somebody. Well, is it really your friend? Or are you really looking out for that particular person? Because a person who's saying, listen, you're only going to make things worse for yourself. You're now involved not only with the school department, with the sanctions that the school department is going to create for you, but you're also going to be involved with the police department.
Should those kids be?
Those kids
are they accomplices? Are they accomplices?
Well, they almost could be, but again, I don't know to the extent that they were involved. But certainly, from the administrative point of view, the girl has to be looked at by the school nurse. Obviously, you've got some blood coming out, you got a broken nose, you got a concussion. Is it the right time to do a complete interview with her by the school department? I'm not going to even involve the police, all right? Because the school has a responsibility to get the facts themselves, all right?
Now, would you have called an ambulance?
If need be, I would think that the nurse would have made that decision. Is this serious enough to that she needs to go to the hospital? That's a nurse's call, okay? She should have made that based on what she saw as far as the attack. I can't say that it required that level of care, but obviously you find out from the victim who the person was, okay, and you try to get some basic facts initially, all right, so that you know what you're dealing with. Then you go get the person who assaulted the young lady, and you start from there. You get the information from that particular person.
They did do that.
Okay, and then the next step, obviously, because there was no adult there, you have to really make some interviews of the people who were around there, all right? And you try to glean for all the interviews exactly what came down, what happened, because kids are not really good observers because their emotions are running so high at the time, and this gang mentality or this swarm mentality, as we call it.
It's a pack mentality.
You're right, it's a pack mentality. That they lose perspective. They don't clearly see what's going on. So
because of that pack mentality, though, should the administration in the building, and maybe even the police, look at identifying kids who are part of that swarm, that pack, whatever you want to call it, and should there be sanctions against them too, if it can in fact be proven that they knew ahead of time, and I'm not talking 5 minutes ahead of time, although that's enough time to get to authorities.
Right.
That's enough time to get to authorities. But if they knew in advance that this was going to happen, are they responsible in any way for failing to bring it up with the administrators so that it could be headed off?
They're clearly responsible because they chose not to report it to the administration. So what I'm thinking is that the administration has to find a level of involvement in the assault, all right? And if they really feel that there's enough level to take sanctions against the students, then obviously they should do that. Part of the administration's job is to interview the victim, interview the person who did the assault, and interview anybody around that we feel are necessary to get all of the information, and then make a basis on the judgment of what to do with all of these different people.
Does it matter in this case too that the girl who physically attacked the victim was I'm told, is a significantly larger girl? Does that weigh into it at all?
No, not for me. I mean, it's just the fact that it was an assault. That it could have been done by
it could have been the other way around.
It could have been the other way around. And I just felt that girl made a decision at that point. She was, to me, the rage in that attack had to be built up so much for her to go after them. It astounds me that nobody tried to intercede in that entire situation. It astounds me that the kids who are, the girl who did the attack and their friends didn't really try to intercede one way or another to prevent this from happening, because the fallout from this will be not just now, but it'll be down the road. The person who did the assaulting faces some serious consequences by the school itself. You're looking at 10 days, and it probably some extended time, potentially, expulsion from school. And if this, take it from this, it had been the first time that this person had ever done anything in the school to really make notice that she was there to do this kind of thing. It's a sad situation because it really ripples down to the rest of your life. Well, not to the rest of your life, but your school year, next year, because that'll be there. And then, of course, there's a separate thing, and I separated from school to police because the police have to do their own thing. It's nice at the police, but before police were in the school, we had to do all of that, and then we would have to make a report to the administration as the school administrator, and then we had to make a report to the police. We had to notify the police that these kinds of situations was done. However, as a school administrator, you can't file a report on the behalf of the child. The parent has to do that, okay? And that's been done. And you know, they will follow through. Now it goes in two different directions. This child faces not only the school, the repercussions from the school, but they also feel now they're in the judicial system now. And whatever they decide to do, whether they go to court, whether something works out and so on, that's a whole different matter. So now that one decision to assault this child has now transcended itself to now being dealt with by the school department and now by the judicial system.
Now these girls, I would think, eventually have to come back to school. What are we dealing with? What are we dealing with there?
To me, you know, when this situation, and you face a lot of these situations, the reentry is very difficult for everybody involved in this situation. It's difficult for let's say that the superintendent decides that, 10 days and then 10 days from him, and he feels that the punishment justifies the action at this point. So this child, after 20 days out, who did the attacking, can go back into school. The victim, let's say that the victim, after all of this, getting surgery and all of this, and is now does this child come back into school? So you have a re-entry where you're bringing the people back in to the situation that they left. Is the anger, is the angst still between the children? What does the school do? The school has to be really in tune.
It's not just between those kids.
No, absolutely not.
And their respective groups of friends.
Exactly. So the school has to be proactive in dealing with that situation. The school should be proactive with everybody that's now involved in the situation. They should be working with these kids. They should be trying to resolve the issues, trying to bring down the heat, so to speak, in the school, and hopefully to transition everybody back in.
Well, doesn't the the sanction against the person who committed the assault have something to do in their mind with whether or not they conduct themselves more appropriately when they come back to school?
Yes, it's hopefully.
If they feel like they got away with something, aren't they more likely to push the envelope again?
We would hope not, and we would hope that we would plan for that not to happen again, because as a condition of coming back into the school, and I know that we made it at school, is if we had a situation that occurred like this, if you had a serious assault, you'd want them to come back and get into work with a counselor or a conflict management kind of a situation, so that there was a place for that child to go.
Well, what about the victim? I mean, I know in this case that there was definitely trepidation at return to school.
Oh, absolutely, it has to be. Absolutely has to be some trepidation.
What do you do?
Same thing. Bring them back and hook them up right away. Even try to start to resolve the issues that they may have had with the person who did the assault. I know that sounds a bit on the edge, but that's where the problem is. They really need to listen to each other and what's going on. Now, the parents may choose a different avenue. There are different avenues available at this particular point. Do the parents send the child back to the school? And what guarantees does the school make for them? What are they going to do to make sure that this doesn't happen again?
Well, getting back to this pack mentality, and all anyone needs to do is go to my Facebook page, Girard At Large, and see the comments that have been posted and listen to the interviews for some of the calls that have come in from some of these girls, to see that the friends of the attacker, who gave me the dickens this morning for labeling her the attacker, and I said, well, listen, what do you call someone who breaks someone's nose, gives them a concussion, ambush, attacks them clearly? What do you call them?
Yeah.
They wanted me just to refer to her as the other girl.
Well, she's an assailant.
She's absolutely an assailant. But so there's obviously some kind of a pack mentality that shows a broader group of people are going to be hostile to the victim.
Absolutely.
Am I as a parent smart to send my daughter back into this? Maybe smart's not the wrong word, but would I be justified if I wanted to say, you know what, I think she should go to Central?
Well, I mean, and as a parent, that would be your choice, and as the parent, you certainly could request from the superintendent that change be made, and based on the information, your uncomfortableness with sending your child back. I mean, at the very least, you'd want to know what the school is going to set up to try to resolve the issue if your child goes back. What kind of, you can't say protection, but what kind of steps are you going to take to make sure that that child has some safety within that school?
A couple of quick questions.
Sure.
Are there just certain personalities, certain kids in school who, for whatever reason, are the object of derision derision from their classmates? I mean, there's some, because, you know, and I'm asking that because a lot of people have said, well, you know, even in her interview when she said that other people have bullied her and other people have picked on her, you know, some of our callers came in and said, well, if it's her and other people, then she's got to be doing something to stir it up. Is that necessarily the case, or are there just some kids who are easy targets for whatever
some
reason?
kids are easy targets. It's a simple matter of, you know, we found one. Let's make that child miserable. Let's do this and do that. The other child may be responding in light because she is being picked on, so she's pushing back, and so that's why this hostility is now created. And as you know today in social media, this just really gets expanded tremendously because it just stops at school.
It's a megaphone.
Right, and it just goes through the computer or whatever the case is. So yeah, I think some kids are a bit more targeted because for whatever reason.
Do you think social media has made these situations more common and more intense?
Absolutely. I wouldn't want to be the principal in today's schools because of social media. It's just expanded all of that.
And final question, which I know I'm going to get in trouble for this one.
Okay.
But there seems to be, again, looking at my Facebook comments and taking the calls, there seems to be a whole lot of girl drama surrounded this. It seems to involve boyfriends and girlfriends and cattiness over who looks this, that, and, quote, getting involved in everybody else's drama, as our callers have called in and said. If this were two guys, what would happen versus, and what's going to happen from the incident on versus what has happened here? Is there really a difference between how girls handle this stuff and how boys handle this stuff, and is this just intensely more nasty because it involves two women?
You may be in trouble for asking the question. I'll probably be in trouble for answering the question, but in my experience, and my experience is 35 years, you know, we'd have a situation that happened girl on girl, and we thought we had it quelled, and 3 months later, doesn't it erupt again? And I'm saying to myself, oh my goodness gracious, we thought we worked this through, we thought this, and whatever, whether the boyfriend or whatever, that just kicked it back up. Boys tend to, okay, they go at each other, beat each other up outside, and you know, by the end of the day, here they are walking out, you know, saying, you know, they were just, you know, at the time, it was just spontaneous and it's done with. So, without trying to be one side or the other side.
Typically speaking, guys will duke it out and move on, and girls will carry it with them. And
well,
there are future triggers. We just need to wait.
Right. I just think that's my experience. So I may be in trouble for saying that, but that's just my experience of 35
but, you know,
years.
but I think it's important to point out, especially in the world of social media, because again, if I take at face value, for example, what Lindsay said, it was a Facebook exchange between the two of them that heightened tensions, and it was a couple weeks prior to the ambush in the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's something that sat out there and it lingers and it festers and it makes you wonder why, and if she's really a cyber bully, as some of her detractors are trying to say, why aren't they going to the authorities? Why aren't they going to their parents? Why aren't they doing these things? Is it because no one takes it seriously? Is it because the administration's unresponsive? Or is it because maybe they're coming up with a cover story now?
Well, it could very well be, and there could be so much of this going on as well, is that do you say, oh, you know, let's deal with the more important ones, or the ones we know are festering, and this one is just, but 2 weeks and this going on, and with the level of group and the swarm and the intensity of the attack, certainly this has been brewing for a while, and maybe somebody at the administration knew about it. Who knows what they were doing? You're only getting one side of the story. The other side is that the administration probably.
And the flip side of this is Lindsay said she came forward because too many people get picked on and they're afraid to step forward, and not enough is done in the buildings to protect them.
And it's interesting because, you know, we developed a code of conduct to deal with problems. We've developed the bullying. You know, there's a law on bullying, and these do not deter kids.
No.
They have never deterred kids. We need to really look at prior situations. How do we deal with things that we know are happening? How can we diffuse situations? To me, that's more important than having to go through this whole situation. You know, this could have been a lot easier dealt with if somebody, and one of those kids, had gone to an adult and said, listen, I know this is coming down. We need to deal with it because it's going to erupt. And that's where I'm really deeply saddened that somebody didn't do that, so that we could have prevented this whole situation, because we would not have had to be talking here today about the code of conduct and what we do with it. We didn't have to be here talking about the bullying law or involving the police department. This child who's now going to have surgery, he's got a concussion, wouldn't have had to go through that. So all the girls who were swarming with the attacker, or the
boys too.
And boys, where were you when these people, you know, your friends were going to do this? Where were you? Why didn't you go to somebody in authority and say, you need to intervene right now? You need to do that, because if you do that, you're going to save a lot of people, because down the road this is not going to be very good for anybody who was involved in this situation.
Rich Girard, former principal, I should say retired principal, vice principal, and teacher from Southside here in Manchester, also my dad. Thanks for joining us here this morning on Girard At Large.